This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Coveil. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. Trading at its heart is an entrepreneurial activity. All traders are entrepreneurs. You must think like an entrepreneur to get ahead. It's foundational. My guest today is not a trader, but he is a serial entrepreneur. Rob Walling has started multiple businesses. He comes from a programming background, and he has seen many successes along the way. His insights are pragmatic. He breaks it down to the nitty-gritty. If you can't learn something from Rob Walling to help you make more money, well, you are most likely comatose. You've probably had a frontal lobotomy already. You're no longer here. So don't pay attention. But for those of you that want to get ahead, for those of you that want some extra insights along your entrepreneurial journey, Rob Walling is worth listening to. I hope you enjoy this conversation. So how you refer to yourself, a solo entrepreneur, a successful solo entrepreneur, but you had to start somewhere. You had to have this initial thinking, this initial timeline that took you to where you are today, some initial skill. What was the beginning trigger? What was that first step along the way, along the journey? I mean, look, you could say, okay, Mike, I was in grade school, but something more specific than that you can really trace to as your foundational moment to where you are today. And we will break apart where you are today, of course.
Going back to grade school, I was the kid selling candy at a 100, 200, 300% markup that I would get in bulk at Price Club or Costco and bring it to school. And it amazed me that I could make more money from that than I could doing chores at home, because I came from a working class background. My dad was an electrician and my mom was a homemaker for a long time. So that was the initial spark of, this is genius. If I can keep doing this, can I do this at a bigger scale?
And how old were you about?
I was probably 9 or 10.
I would say something similar happened to me in garage sales, being able to sell junk, or maybe not junk, but, to sell stuff to people. And all of a sudden you're like, wow, I've got a lot more cash than doing the lawn cutting.
Exactly. Yeah, there's leverage in this stuff. That's what I saw early on, was that the dollars for an hour's work wasn't going to scale. I didn't see that at 10, but I started seeing that in high school, where, you get a minimum wage job, a $7 an hour job. And I realized, boy, I'm not going to get ahead doing this. Even if I make more money, I still have to put in all these hours. And so by that time I started thinking, can I write a book or a booklet? Unfortunately, there were no ebooks back then, because I'm 40 years old, so the internet wasn't around. But that was the thing, is like, what can you get that you can leverage, that you can do once and then sell many times?
Okay, so you've got the philosophy, you've got the thinking. How did you become a programmer? What was the trigger for that?
That was actually a few years earlier. My parents had purchased an Apple IIe when I was 8 years old, and my brother and I learned, there wasn't so much you could do on a computer in 1982. You could play a few games, and there was a few apps, but we really wanted to play games and then make our own. And in order to do that, you had to learn this archaic language. It was called BASIC, and there's still versions of it around today. But we sat there and we put in the time, we put in the hours. The fact that we could create something and make this computer do something was amazing. It was the best feeling. And at that point, there was no thought of making money from that. That purely was this love and this hobby. And then it resurfaced, kind of went away in high school, because it's not cool to be a programmer. It wasn't in 1991 when I was in high school, early 90s. Once I got back in college, this is like mid 90s, and things were just starting to ramp up with the internet. And I realized, could I possibly combine this passion. Like I really do love programming. It just fits who I am. I would do it if I was doing it when no one paid me, and I would continue to. And then I started realizing, oh, some people are making money with this. Is there a possibility to do that long term and build something that scales?
Let me see if I can draw some inference here from some of your success and some of your wisdom that you can pass along to people. And I can relate in a very minor way. I look at my world, the trading world, a lot of the best traders getting started in the 1970s, and they were coding and automating trading systems. So they were working in Fortran and things like that. And when I look at myself in the mid-1990s, zero coding experience, but hiring someone to build my first website in the mid-1990s, that not working, and me being left with, if I don't figure out a way to present myself online, I can't reach the people that I want to reach. So it was like this forced self-taught, under pressure, under gun. But I think there's something interesting as I tie my little bit of experience, the traders that I bumped into you. There's something to be said for having this intimate knowledge of tools, especially programming tools. And for those people that think they don't need to take some time to understand the basics, they're losing out on the single biggest entrepreneurial advantage one can have today, which is to have some type of, even if it's on a limited basis like me, some type of coding experience. To have knowledge of that game is the game for the last 30, 40 years, isn't it?
I have a 9-year-old and he's doing Codecademy, and I teach him stuff on the side. He may never be a coder. He may not like it, but at least if he understands what it is and how to give instructions to a computer, it puts you so far ahead of folks who have never done it. And there's this term you've probably heard floating around called a growth hacker. And the term has kind of been bastardized at this point, where it has all these definitions. The original intent of it, the original idea, was that it was a marketer who knew how to code and who could do these hacks that you couldn't even think of. You couldn't even imagine if you didn't have technical skill. And a technical knowledge of how computers work and how you can scrape websites and that kind of stuff. So I think it's par for the course today and moving forward that in most fields, having some type of understanding of coding is only going to be a leg up. Even if you don't necessarily enjoy it, it's eating the world, as Mark Andreessen said.
It's such a classic example, and it's obviously been overplayed with several movies recently, but Steve Jobs is a great example of a guy that did not have, of course, he was brilliant and obviously knew the ins and outs of many things, but he did not have the technical skills of many of the people that he worked with. But he was wise enough, bright enough, smart enough to know how it all fit together.
That's right. That's right. And there's, my dad, I mentioned he was an electrician. He worked out in the field and he did all types of in the Bay Area, they would build fabs and they would build data centers. And he had this amazing technical skill of being able to do these complex projects. And as he rose up and began to manage people and then became a project manager and then a project manager of project managers, that technical skill, even though he didn't touch wire anymore, was an incredible benefit. And he taught me way early on. From the time I was, 7 or 8 years old, there were business guys who were being project managers. And as he became that, he always said, I have that edge because I have the technical skill. And I think it translates to software. I think it translates to hardware. I think it translates to being, an auto mechanic or even designing. Let's say you're at Tesla and you're designing, these amazing automobiles. If 20 years ago you were a mechanic and you had that technical skill, you absolutely have a leg up on someone who never did that. Putting in those hours, getting the grime on your hands, and being a technician, I believe is a leg up in any industry.
If I looked at the source code for your website, something fairly simple, I think my skill is I know what I can touch exactly without breaking it.
Nice.
You know how I learned that, right? With no coding experience at all, I learned what breaks and what doesn't break.
Absolutely. Well, that's, and when you're thrown in the fire, that's often the best way to learn. Some of my early projects, once I became a professional, and meaning I started getting paid to code, which was the late 90s, the first project I was working for a small consulting firm that was being hired by .coms to build, websites and web apps. And they said, here you go, kid, you're out of college, you're building your first site in Perl. And I said, I don't know Perl. And they said, there's a book, there's the spec, go build it, which was awesome. It was awesome. I worked 12-hour days. I had headphones with music blaring. I learned so much. I learned more in the first 2 months of doing that about writing code than I had in 4 years of a computer engineering degree. because when you get thrown into fire like that, or like you did, where you have to modify your own website, that's where you really start making strides with this stuff.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And then when you get older, you kind of look back and you realize when you're dealing with someone else as a contractor or whatnot, you kind of know where the bodies are buried. You kind of know when someone's giving you the straight scoop or the bullshit. Hey, I don't know if you noticed this when I exchanged some notes with you about who I talked to prior to my podcast. And I don't know if you know him personally or just work with his coding framework, which is Jason Fried. He was my first outside web developer I ever hired.
Oh, wow. I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
Yeah.
He and I have exchanged, he wouldn't know who I am, but he and I have exchanged a few emails and have mutual friends. I actually asked him to write the foreword to my book, and he was too busy at the time. But that is crazy. So was that like the late 90s?
Yeah, late 90s, early 2000s. There was this 37 Signals, and they were specializing in usability. They were the only people I could find online that were specializing in usability of websites. And then quickly after that, he's become quite successful.
Indeed.
Yeah. Let me jump into something because I can hear it in your voice, and there's so many topic areas I can touch on today, but I want to kind of go through some of these key topics that are very important to you. And literally some of these people can find more in-depth explanations on your site and at your blog, but I want to kind of pick them apart. And like I said, I can hear it in your voice, which is passion. How much has passion played? Here you are, you're a guy that programs, okay? But passion is right there alongside that skill, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's always been there. I'm not the type of person that could do something that I didn't enjoy. And in fact, when I tried to for about a couple years, my dad worked for that construction firm, and I tried to work there for about 18 months, and it was a good gig in the Bay Area. You know, I had a leg up, and it was a good path, but I didn't have the passion for electrical construction. It really tore me up during that time. And that's when I was teaching myself to code on the side, nights and weekends. You know, I'm going to the library and getting books on web software. I mean, who does that? And then it turned into a career, and it was one of the best decisions of my life, hands down.
Did you know that was your passion, though? I think back to my early starts. I don't know if I was just doing these crazy things to get to where I wanted to go, but I don't know if I defined it as passion at that moment in time.
I don't think I knew that either. I knew I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the act of creating, and I enjoyed the technology and using a computer to do that, to create. I don't know that if you'd asked me, I would have realized that. I guess I just thought kind of everybody did that, to be honest. You know, it's like you're in the midst of this thing. I'd been writing code on and off since I was 8 years old. I just figured, this is just kind of what you do, and you build stuff. I didn't realize it was different, or that I was necessarily so passionate about it as much as it was just something I did. Kind of like every morning you get up, you eat breakfast, you know, you have lunch, you have dinner. I mean, you don't think about that as well. I'm passionate about food or whatever. It just was something that I did.
Did you have friends at the time needling you and saying, hey, you know, why aren't you doing what we're doing? Why are you going? Why don't you, I tell you what, before I even ask that question, why don't you explain your path some? Because you didn't start off as the solo entrepreneur success story. You started off more working for someone, correct?
Yeah, that's right. I came out of school in the late 90s, and I worked for the construction firm for about 18 months, 2 years. I came out of that and worked for a consulting firm. I actually started writing code, and that was a really good decision. And right around 2000, things started picking up for me in terms of knowledge and just really enjoying what I was doing. And I realized at that point, this is probably what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. On and off from 2000 until about 2007, I was either a salaried employee or I was doing my own consulting, freelance work, and I had several clients. But I was really knee-deep in the code during that time. And in 2005, I'm kind of parallel processing. I'm still doing consulting, but I started having a small amount of success with software products, things you can write once and then you sell, many copies of. And that first one was a piece of invoicing software, and I acquired it from some developers who couldn't market it. And then once I learned enough, I learned really one or two marketing approaches from there. And then I kind of parlayed them into several different products. And I had a bunch of products, each making maybe a couple thousand a month. And that was enough for me to kind of quit the day job, so to speak, which at the time was consulting. So around 2007, 2008, I transitioned really full-time into products. And I wanted to do it solo forever, I thought. And to be honest, about let's see, it was about 18 months ago, I hired my first employee. Now there's 5 of us. So as much of a solo entrepreneur as I have been, I feel like I'm perhaps making another transition at this point, into more of a full-fledged software company.
I still think that if I could keep everything 100% solo and I had no responsibilities except myself, that would be my preferred role. But so that was really your trigger, though. Your trigger was the making the extra money, and you said, okay, I see the extra money coming in, I can leave the salary.
Yeah, well, to be honest, the trigger was I realized that working the salaried gig, there are only so many decent software jobs. You'll either get jobs that are really fun at startups, but you have to work really long hours, and the pay is so, and it's for stock options. And there were kind of some crazy years of that, which were fun. But then I got married, then I had a kid, and it's like, I can't really do that anymore. I can't do the 70+ hour weeks. So then I moved over to more of a stable, it was for a credit card company in Los Angeles. There's a bunch of financial stuff down there. And then that became kind of boring and corporate and political, and you get into that side of things, kind of the other side. I made more money there doing that, but I realized, boy, this is not for me either. So then freedom was consulting, I thought, or freelance work. Boy, if I could just work when I wanted, pick my clients and do all that. And so I made the leap to that, and that was cool for a couple years. But then it gets old because instead of one boss, you have 5 bosses, right? Each of your clients who pays you a good chunk of money can kind of dictate a lot of things to you. It isn't until I got to the point where I had, products that maybe had hundreds or thousands of customers that any one person doesn't control your destiny. And that's what was bothering me about being salary employed and then even consulting, was there were just too few people that had a real stranglehold on my financial well-being. And I felt like I wasn't going to break out of that. And not wanting to scale up a consulting firm, which is, that's a huge labor-intensive thing. The trigger then was, well, what's next? Is there something better than this? And to be honest, Jason Fried and 37 Signals was an influence on me, along with some other software greats like Joel Spolsky and Eric Sink, who were doing it around that time. And as the products picked up, then that was a trigger. I realized, that's, I think, really my out, where I can be much more in control of my destiny. And as you said, the first 5 years, I was completely solo with just a few contractors, and it was absolutely the right choice for me.
As a startup expert, you're a guy that started multiple businesses. You've had some successes. I'm sure you've had a few failures. But what I want to pick apart now, after giving the audience some of that foundation of your world, I want to pick on some big picture issues. And then at the end, I want to address something that I had texted you about, which I want to talk about some of your marketing automation software. I want a little education myself personally, but I want to pick your mind in some of these big picture topics that are really near and dear to you. One of the things that for myself, I always hear from people, they're like, hey, Mike, you just need to get more traffic to your website. Just get more traffic, and everything will be gold. And it's kind of this Chinese math that everyone's had for eons. There's 1.4 billion Chinese. If you just get 1%, you can retire. There's something nefarious. There's something really off-putting about the just focusing on traffic, isn't there?
Absolutely. Because there's this whole other piece to actually monetizing that traffic, and that's basically a sales funnel or a marketing funnel of some kind. And if you are just driving more traffic and you're not doing some split tests, or at least thinking deliberately about your copy on your website, thinking deliberately about the funnel that someone walks down, the path someone walks down from the time they get to your homepage, what do they see? Are they stumbling around? Do you guide them? Do you give them 1 or 2 links to choose from, or do you give them 100 links? Because if you give them 100 links, or even let's say 15 links, they're very likely to wander off. And so even if you dump a bunch more traffic into that bucket, it just runs out the bottom. And that's kind of the the leaky bucket or the leaky funnel idea. And so thinking about someone arriving at your website and taking that path, if you're able to optimize that path just a little bit at each step, if you get 10% in the first step and then 10% to the next step and 10% on the third step, it becomes exponentially more valuable. So 10% plus times 10% times 10%, rather than, you'd have to add tens of thousands of new visitors to your website, which is a lot harder than just kind of tweaking that path.
I should tell the audience that there is some optimization underway at my website, so please don't go to my website right now based on what you just heard. Because you're going to see a bucket that apparently has no bottom.
Oh yeah, okay, I'm here. Yep,
don't look.
Well, hopefully by the time this comes out, you might have some changes to it.
Well, hold on, but this is where we're going. If I can at least get some of the marketing automation figured out on the back end, we'll get to that at the end of this conversation. Let me keep jumping on you though. Some different directions. You mentioned Jason Fried. Big influence on me. I've loved his writing, his thinking. I used to just go and look at his website all the time to see how they were designing things. It was just brilliant to me. And I've seen you talk about Seth Godin. I mean, there's literally, I have a hard time finding a post at Seth Godin's website that I disagree with. It's all just this straightforward stuff. Now, you need to have a little experience to kind of see, to use the secret decoder ring to understand why Seth says, or what Seth says is accurate. That's true. But isn't there the case too that whether it's Mike Coveil or you, Rob, or Jason Fried or Seth Godin, too much information is not necessarily helping the bootstrapper, is it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's the dilemma of our of our world right now, right? It's trying to be able to filter through the enormous amount of stuff that's coming at us. And I've found that a big part of being a bootstrapper is that you have to learn constantly. I'm still in the phase of learning that next step, of learning things that I don't know, such as maybe managing multiple employees, or taking an app to the next level, to the the higher level that I've never been at. The problem is not being inundated with 10 different viewpoints on how to get there. So when you're at square one and you say, okay, I'm a software developer, or maybe I know a little bit about marketing and I'm going to launch a product, who do you listen to about this, right? Because there are 20 people shouting at the top of their lungs, if not 200 people with podcasts and blogs and all this information. The tact that I've started to take is to pick a few people who just they resonate with you. Their approach, maybe their moral outlook, the way they view whether it's marketing or the way they build product, that it really resonates and you think, boy, this really makes a lot of sense what they're talking about. And then to kind of focus in on them, and pick a couple people. Like I said before, Jason Fried was an influence, and Joel Spolsky and Eric Sink. And that, for me, that was it until probably around 2007, 2008. Then I picked up Seth Godin. And then, to be honest, Joel Spolsky kind of faded into the background. He stopped writing so much. So I still had, just a few people that I was listening to. Now more and more coming in and out of my life, I've become better at kind of filtering and following more people and kind of pulling the best from them. But I think when you're just starting out, it can be overwhelming because you don't have that knowledge or experience of how to take in, the viewpoint of 10 different people and realize that one's mistaken. Like, you don't have enough experience to know that if two people are conflicting each other, which one's right. And I think the more experience you get, the better you are at doing that and kind of reconciling it, as well as just as filtering and only taking the stuff that you need at that point in time.
It's interesting you say that because I'm in my 40s too. And I especially see younger people today, and the way they're going about trying to make decisions, you realize they have no experience. They might be very bright. They might have a little experience, but they have literally no experience. So they're asking for permission. They're asking for how to do something. So, for example, a common friend of ours I saw, and I don't say this in a negative way, but he was asking for some insights on what's the best way to give a public presentation, like speech advice. And everybody that posted said, read this book. It's like 20 different books people threw at the poor guy. And all I said was, no, get up on stage, do one, do another, do a third, keep doing that, learn from what the audience gives you. And that's how you do it. But that's from a guy who's got a lot of experience being on stage. But I was looking at a situation where a 20-something was getting advice about giving public presentations from other 20-somethings. And it just felt like a never-ending information overload.
That's fascinating because, you and I are similar ages. And when I was 21 years old, I didn't even have access to that kind of information, right? I wouldn't have had a forum that I could have asked. I wouldn't have had all the books and the podcasts and the blogs about public speaking. And so, you know what I would have done? I would have either gone to Barnes & Noble or Borders, and I'd have bought one book because that's all I had the money for. And what you're saying is maybe that's better. in certain situations, especially early on, that you are resource limited and you just have to read one thing and focus on it and just figure it out on your own from there.
I think there's a lot of truth to that because it becomes information. There's just too much, and and people are sitting there not making decisions. And then I think they also don't have that desperation in themselves because they feel like, well, if this little idea that I'm thinking about right now doesn't work out, I'm thinking about another little idea that might work out. And if that one doesn't work out, I can change my mind and think about something else.
Yeah, I think there's kind of this pendulum swing, right? From early in my career, right, around 2000 or whatever, I would spend 6 months or a year thinking about an idea, then building an idea. And we didn't have the lean startup. We didn't have the customer development where you're kind of trying to iterate on things and get them out there really quick and fail fast. I mean, that just wasn't even thought of back then. And perhaps the pendulum has swung too far, right? Where the people are already thinking about the next thing when they're a month into their first idea. And I think it depends a lot on personality, but I also think that there certainly is a lot of text going on or dialogue about maybe giving up or pivoting too quickly.
And a guy like you, maybe a guy like me, you can see through if the depth is not there. If that person and their product or their idea, they might think they're showing you the depth, but someone with experience sees, no, this is skin deep.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Hey, one thing I want to kind of get you to address. So we all look at the success of someone like Mark Zuckerberg, a guy in his 20s. I have not even looked at the most recent Wikipedia listing to see how many billions he's worth. But I look at that success. And so many people want to talk about Zuckerberg like there's some type of a formula that you can follow called the Zuckerberg formula that you too will follow and end up with the same untold amount of billions. Then I also look at something like the Drudge Report, which the Drudge Report today still drives more traffic than literally most media sites combined. If I listen to someone like Drudge, he's a very interesting guy when he talks, and he talks about, hey, do your own thing on the web, have your own platform. But he's kept literally the same design since the late 1990s. I don't know how much information there is to be gleaned truly from some of these survivors from the biggest success stories of the last 20 or 30 years. Whereas instead of focusing on a Zuckerberg that's got untold billions, somebody might be completely ignoring the idea that can make them 5 million.
I've found that to be very true in my experience. I think it parallels mine very well because as a software developer, especially coming up in the early 2000s, and now is another great boom time. If you look at any media, any press, let's say TechCrunch, Mashable, VentureBeat, Inc. magazine, Entrepreneur magazine, any of the press that we look at, it is so focused on this survivor bias and this $1 billion, the word unicorn, it's a company valued at $1 billion. That seems to be the expectation and is becoming a normative concept. But the problem is every year there are literally a handful. I mean, I think 5 unicorns or 10. I mean, it's just a few, and there are 10,000 that just completely flame out. The thing that folks aren't talking as much about, and basically what folks like myself, and there's several others, there's Dan Norris, and frankly, mutual friend Dan Andrews and Ian, we're talking about how to build businesses that still have some scale, have a lot of freedom to it, and they're still super interesting to build and work on, and you can get ultra fulfillment out of it. But what if that business only makes $250,000 or $1 million, or as you said, $4 or $5 million? There are certain points in there where you still get so much of the satisfaction, and yet your chance of succeeding are so much higher. I mean, if you pick, in my space, I kind of specialize in this business-to-business, software as a service. So it's online products. If you can hit a niche, you have a little bit of experience, you have a little bit of funding at your back, I think you can get a success rate of 1 in 10, 1 in 5 when you get good at this. Not early on, but as you move on. I mean, you see these serial entrepreneurs where everything they do after the first few succeeds. But if you're going after the Zuckerberg story, the Zuckerberg myth, I mean, we're talking 1 in how many others started? Even how many social networks started and failed? There's tens of thousands of people who've shot for that level and haven't done it. So I think there's real room. It's where no one's talking about, right? The mainstream press is looking over there. So let's zag while they're zigging, and let's build some real nice, profitable, fun businesses over here that may be laughed at by the venture community. Maybe we're only making $500,000 or $1 million or something, but It sure is fun. I mean, it's the same thing with 37 Signals, who we've referenced a few times. They've built a really solid business without kind of chasing after the purple unicorns in the sky.
Okay, so let's shift this a little bit. You've mentioned TechCrunch. You've brought up the idea of media and press. Let's say someone's a startup, and you're a guy that's there's so many insights on your blog that people can dig through. But let's just say where you're advising a startup, someone's got this product, they want to sell it, whatnot. And they come to you and they say, hey, Rob, but all I need, just let me get on the front page of TechCrunch. Let me get a little of that press that one day. If I can get on CNBC, everything's going to happen. My dreams will come true.
Yeah, that is this fallacy of this one-hit wonder. I love this quote there's a quote from Steve Martin in his autobiography called It's Born Standing Up. And he has this quote that says, it's easy to be great. It's hard to be consistent. And what he meant by that is he would see these comedians who would come on the scene and they'd have this one blockbuster night and they could never repeat it because they just didn't stick around and stick in for the long haul and hone their skills and build something over time. And that's the same mentality that makes people think that you can get to the top of TechCrunch or the top of Hacker News, the top of Product Hunt, and that's going to make your product. What that will do is be a nice little seed. That'll be your one night of greatness, right? Where, boy, we got 1,000 signups or 300 signups, or we got $10,000 in revenue. That's really cool. We got 50,000 unique visitors. All that's great. And you can celebrate and you can include the Product Hunt logo on your website. Now you have to build a business. What are you going to do next? What are you going to do in 7 days once the traffic and the revenue and that stuff is kind of gone from that initial launch? And that's when you have to get back to fundamentals, and you really got to put in the time over the long term if you want to actually be consistent and build a business that's going to last longer than a month or two.
You have a very specific approach to bootstrapping. Can't break it apart as much as we would like to today, but I would love for you to kind of give people the 37,000 foot look down at what you call the stair-step approach.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a whole blog post where I've kind of outlined it, folks can reference, but the idea is that maybe 10 years ago when 37 Signals and those guys were starting, there were not very many software as a service apps. There's not a lot of competition for these subscription software businesses. These days, everyone is rushing into this. The venture capitalists, the software developers, the idea of recurring revenue is really appealing. And it's true, it's a great business to be in. The problem is there's so much competition that whether it's a first-time developer or just a non-technical person or a designer or someone who just wanting to get into this, someone trying to build a software as a service app that's a subscription revenue thing, it's very, very competitive. And you need a lot of different things on your tool belt to be able to do it. You need, some confidence that you really can. You need some experience. You probably need a little bit of money, maybe not funding, but a little bit of a war chest. And you need some actual marketing skills. Someone on your team has to be able to either do SEO or pay-per-click or some type of marketing channel that you can kind of leverage. So the idea behind Stair-Step is there are essentially 3 steps to it. Step 3 is building that recurring business, that software as a service business. Or it could be a membership website with recurring payments. But you don't start there. You work your way up to the major leagues in essence. Step 1, backing up, is to build something like an ebook or like a software product like WordPress plugin, or just something with a single one-time sale and a single sales channel, right? A single marketing channel that you learn to master. So you're not going to get rich off this. You're not going to, maybe not even quit your job. You might make $1,000 a month or $2,000 a month from a WordPress plugin that helps people, integrate with Stripe or integrate with Eventbrite or just, some little niche thing. But you have a pro upgrade and you learn how to do some SEO. You learn how to work with WordPress. You have a single channel of traffic and you have a single purchase price. And then you take that and you multiply it. You do 2 WordPress plugins, 3 WordPress plugins. At a certain point, you make enough money. This is step 2, where, hey, I'm making $8-10 grand a month. I can actually buy out my own time. I don't need to consult anymore. I don't need to have a salaried job. And I keep using WordPress plugins, but they're, you can build a mobile app. You can do Magento add-ons. You can write an ebook. I mean, there's certain different things you can do. It doesn't have to be software. Once you get to step 2, you now have all of your time that you've bought out, so you have way more time than when you were trying to do it on nights and weekends. You have some income diversification. So quitting your job isn't so scary because you have 3 or 4 different products, and you have experience, right? Because you've developed some marketing channels that you can execute on, and you have confidence. And I think confidence, that mental side of this, is a huge part of it. And then at that point, you then think about how do I leverage my experience up into some type of subscription business where it is more competitive and harder to do.
Many of the people in my audience are traders, but I've got a very diverse list of people that as yourself, coming onto my podcast. I think one of the things that traders mistakenly do is there's this whole network of people that consult traders on their marketing. But most of it is just about pretty websites. So for those of you out there that are trading, that are running a fund or whatnot, I would implore you to take a deeper look at the things that Rob is talking about, because these are right. This is universal. This isn't just something that's like for, guys doing, as you say, it's not just about one thing. It's a thought process. It's a philosophy, and it applies to anything in one's life if you're going to be in business.
And you try to start with the big guys, and you look at what MICHAEL Covel's doing, and you think, boy, I can do that tomorrow. You don't have the experience, you don't have the audience, you don't have so much stuff that I'm sure you're 10 or 20 years to overnight success, right? It's like you have to start at the beginning, and you have to think, how do I build a tiny little audience? How do I write that first ebook to get some revenue? How do I write multiple ebooks? And you build it out over time, and you can't jump to the majors if you haven't played Little League yet.
I really think, and we're breaking it apart in this conversation, but for those people that are in their 20s that are very bright, and I've met some of these people in the last 2-3 years, there is an experience thing that you have to, I almost want to say, if you're in your 20s right now, you're very bright, you have some experience, just imagine you're missing something and you don't know what it is you're missing, but you have to imagine that you're missing it because the world has convinced you that you have it all and you don't. And you're actually believing the world that you have it all and you don't. So it's almost like you got to put that splinter in your mind that says, I don't have it all. I don't have it all. I'm not there yet.
That is experience, right? It's like getting in there and getting that first thing in public. I think there's a phrase I use. It's do things in public. And what I tend to mean by that is until you have launched a single blog post or a single podcast episode or written an ebook and tried to sell it to someone, you can read all you want, but you're like somebody in a bubble where you don't actually understand. You just don't have the knowledge of what it really takes to do it. And the first time you do it, you're going to get the wind knocked out of your sails, and you're going to feel terrible, and your hair is going to stand up on the back of your neck because you're going to launch this blog post or this podcast, you're going to do your first talk on stage, and these things terrify you. And no matter how smart and motivated you are, until you've done that and got over the terrifying feeling, you don't gather that experience. But then the more you do it, the easier each of these things become. I speak from firsthand experience. The first time I ever published a blog post, I remember just getting hot. I must have blushed or what, I don't know what I looked like, but started sweating. All I was doing was pushing, publish on a blog that no one was reading. The same thing was the first podcast episode I ever published, and the first time I stood up on stage and did a talk. And now I do these things, you just don't even think about them because you gain that experience over time, and you get over the fear of failure, and there's both confidence and experience, I think, that tie into this. And yeah, it's pretty hard to have when you're 20 years old.
How did this conversation start? How did this happen today? For me, somebody told me about this piece of marketing automation software, and I'm currently using something called Aweber. And Aweber helps for me to communicate with clients via email primarily, and it helps me to get messages out there. But it's very much just press a button, broadcast. There's not a lot of ability to change things as one might want to change as you gather a little of experience and you realize you'd like more features. Lo and behold, I hear about this product called Drip, and then I check out who owns this company, and hence we're having a podcast. Tell me why. I already kind of know why, but why do I need to get away from some of these basic programs that everyone's heard about, the Constant Contacts, the Awebers, the MailChimps, these big names? They've probably got these great big old valuations in Silicon Valley. What are you doing differently with Drip? Tell me the big picture, and then let's break it apart some.
The big picture is that the standard email marketing software was great in 2000 to 2005, let's say. When you write software, after you've been in business for years and you have millions and tens of millions of rows in your database and you have thousands or tens of thousands of customers, it becomes very, very hard to change that software and to update it. You can roll out patches, you can roll out some new features, but you cannot keep up with the pace of the features and the innovation that's going on in certain spaces. If you're building software for, I don't know, loggers or dry cleaners, there's probably not a ton of innovation going on there. But if you're building it for marketers or traders, and that type of stuff, this stuff changes monthly. There are new concepts, new ideas, new approaches. Just the table stakes, they grow each time. So that's the problem. I am a fan. I used MailChimp for years. I used Campaign Monitor. These tools they're good entry-level tools. The thing is once you have any type of complexity, once you really start getting some experience, you start building a business, they aren't sophisticated enough to keep up with the needs of the things you're trying to do. So one example is, if you're an AWeber, I know that you sell multiple products. I know that you have all types of lists in AWeber, I would guess, 20, 30, 40 lists. And these people are siloed. So you might have, if I had bought 3 products from you, my email address would probably be on 3 completely separate lists. And you don't know that that's me. You see it as 3 separate email addresses. This is a very common issue, is this list-based system. So that's the first thing that we solve with Drip. There's only one list. So if I bought 3 products from you, I would appear once in your account, and there would be just 3 tags or 3 events attached to me that said, hey, Rob bought product number 1, and then he bought product number 2, and then he bought product number 3. So you have more of a view as a person. And you can track purchases and that kind of stuff. So that's where it is. The old tools are still, I think, decent entry-level stuff, but folks are outgrowing them pretty quickly these days.
As you mentioned, though, they know, the features and the ideas that you've come up with, of course, there's your ingenuity, and then it is the being aware of the competition, and you've got these new ideas. But the real issue is these established companies just can't change to compete, is the story that you're outlining.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. They can't move fast enough. Coming back again to 37 Signals, they have a product called Basecamp. They have completely rewritten Basecamp twice now. They have 2 or 3 different versions because they are trying to keep up with all the competition in that space. And that complete rewrite is a big investment, but that's what they've done in order to keep up with everything. These larger companies, like you said, AWeber, MailChimp, Constant Contact, they're not doing that. It's their choice, and they're also probably a lot larger than Basecamp, so it'd be harder for them. But that's the idea. Software becomes it's like building a skyscraper. You can't go back and replace that foundation once it's up. It's just too hard.
So if I come join Drip, am I going to be lost in the deep sea chasm of us newbies and novices that can't use this complicated tool for I've seen all the features I need yesterday. Is it going to be easy for me? Is it going to be pain? Am I going to lose blood?
I would certainly hope not. We have designed it from day one. I have my co-founder is a usability user interface expert. He's amazing at this stuff, at thinking through how do we make this as simple as possible for people. And that's a big thing because we have competition. Drip has competition that your folks probably have never heard of. It's tools like Infusionsoft and Marketo and Pardot. They're big and cumbersome, and that's something we really focused on, was trying to be as simple as possible. So the power of the larger enterprise tools, the hard to use tools, the power of that, but with the usability of a really simple tool. And we focused on it. We also have, frankly, customer success people in-house that will help you walk through it if you get confused, for sure.
I think sometime in the future, Rob, if you will appear again, I would love to maybe pick some particular topics in advance and really break them apart in detail. Today, I wanted to give people just a broad overview, but I think we could pick a few things and probably fill an hour really fast.
Yeah, it would be my pleasure. I'd love to do it.
Where can we send people? Where's the best place to find you?
Getdrip.com is the website. if you're listening to this and you like other podcast content, I have 2 podcasts. I'll just point one out for now. It's called Startups for the Rest of Us. It's on episode 260. We've been recording it every week for 5 years. And I basically spend 30 minutes a week talking with, the co-host about what we're doing. It's our startups and software, and it's just all the stuff we've kind of dug into here. I'm talking about on a regular basis.
Cool stuff, Rob. And there's also, hold on, your personal page too, right? We can send them there to check out the blog post.
That's right. Softwarebyrob.com is where, several of the early topics we talked about came from. The Stair-Step, there's details on that and a few other things.
Rob, thank you for your time. Appreciate it, sir.
It's my pleasure.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.